Hey guys, in this video, let's discuss JWT authentication for Azure API management. So guys, let's imagine we have a stocks API and we have configured Azure API management for the stocks API. And now let's say there is some other service or some other app. For example, XYZ Finance Consultancy, which consumes our stocks API. So guys, when we developed this stocks API in the past, it did not have any authentication. So this XYZ Finance Consultancy, it can consume our stocks API without JWT authentication. Okay. But now we want to protect our API using JWT so that only authorized service or only authorized app should be able to consume our API. So we will see JWT in action in this video. So guys, what are the steps at high level? So guys, first we will add app registration for Azure APIM in Azure tenant. So that will represent our app, that is Azure APIM app. And remember, this APIM, it calls our stocks API behind the scene. So that was first step. Then we will add app registration for this XYZ Finance Consultancy. See guys, this is our API consumer. And in this video, Postman will be acting as API consumer. And then we will add JWT inbound policy in Azure API. That is the third step. And finally, we will generate JWT token and we will call this stocks API. And now let's go to the Azure portal. So guys, we are in Azure and this is our APIM instance, that is our APIM. So we are under APIs and we have API, that is our first function app. So basically I have added APIs from function app. Okay. And in this we have this operation, that is get stocks list. Let's actually test this operation. So again we are under this test tab. So let's copy this request URL. So guys, we are in Postman and let's try to call that API from Postman. I will say send. And yes, it says 200 okay, and we have received the list of stocks as well, right? And now we can call this API without providing any token. And now obviously we want to implement JWT authentication, right? So first step, let's add app registration for our Azure APIM. So guys, we are back in Azure. I will duplicate this tab. Let's click on Home, Microsoft Entra ID. So guys, now we are in this default directory or default tenant. Okay. Now, can you see these applications? So let's click on this 0. All applications. And now here, let's add app registration for Azure APIM. So I will say register an application. And here I will say app for APIM. And I will say register. Now guys, this will represent our Azure API management, right? And Azure API management, it represents APIs, that is external users or external service. They are consuming our API from Azure APIM, right? So obviously we need to expose APIs. So let's click on expose an API. Here application ID URI, I will say add and I will say save. So we have added application ID URI. Now guys, our Azure API management, it may expose couple of roles. Let's say we have basic role. So with this role, any other external application, it can consume only basic APIs, and then we may have advanced role. And with advanced role, other external application, it can consume all the APIs from our Azure APIM, right? So we need to add application role as well. So let's click on this app roles. I will say create app role. And here I will say app role.basic and we will be assigning this role to application. So it's applications. I will provide same value and same description, and here let's say apply. So guys, we have added app registration for our Azure API, but now we want to add app registration for this external app as well, that is XYZ Finance Consultancy. That is, it is the external app which is consuming our API from Azure APIM, right? So I will duplicate this tab. Here let's say home, again Microsoft Entra ID. So again we are back in tenant, and under applications we can see one, because we have just added one application and now we are adding one more. So let's click on this one, all applications. I will say new registration, and here I will say XYZ Finance Consultancy, and I will say register. And now guys, we need to provide the required permission for this external app to access our Azure API, right? So for that, let's go to this API permissions. Here I will say add a permission. API is my organization uses, and here let's search for the Azure APIM app which we created, and you can see the name is app for APIM. So here I will search for app for API. So let's select it. So let's assign this basic role to this app. I will say add permissions, and here guys we need to grant the admin consent as well. So let's click on it, and I will say yes. Now guys, for this external app we want to add client secret as well, right? So let's click on certificates and secrets. Let's say new client secret. Let's give name. So we'll say secret, and let's say add. And guys, this secret, that is the value of this secret, it will be visible for one time only. So let's copy it and let's save it somewhere. So I will paste it in Notepad. So basically that's it guys, as far as the changes in Microsoft Entra ID is concerned. And now let's go back to our Azure APIM. So guys, we are back in Azure APIM. So we are under this operation, that is get stocks list, and we are under design. Now guys, on the right hand side, can you see this inbound processing? Let's go down, and here let's say add policy. Let's go down, and here let's select this validate JWT. Basically here we need to provide all the information related to the Azure AD JWT authentication which we are going to use. Okay, so header name, let's give, let's say authorization. Failed HTTP code, let's keep it 401. Failed validation message, so I will say it's invalid login. And guys, this is important, that is audience. So basically audience, it represents our app registration entry for Azure APIM. So let's click on this add audience, and now let's go to app registration for Azure APIM. So here now I will go to this expose an API, and guys, can you this application ID URI? So that is our audience. So let's actually copy it and let's paste it under this audience. Then add claim. So let's click on it, and again we want to add a claim for audience. So I will say AUD match, I will say any claim, and again the value, it will be this one, that is this application ID URI for app registration for our Azure APIM. Now let's go down, and guys, this open ID URLs, and it will be this one, that is https login.microsoftonline.com, and then we have this GUID, that is 23E8. so basically this represents tenant ID. Okay, so obviously you will need to add your own tenant ID, but then rest of the URL will be same. And again, of course, I will add this URL in the description of this video. So let's simply copy this and let's add it as OpenID URLs. So basically that's it guys, and now let's say save. So now we have enabled JWT authentication for our API in Azure APIM, right? So guys, we are back in Postman, and if you remember earlier we could call this API without providing any JWT token. Let's try it again. So again I will say send, but now you see it says 401, that is unauthorized, and again the message is it's invalid login, and this is the same message we configured when we added JWT policy, right? So obviously if you want to call this API, we need to provide the JWT token, right? And how to retrieve that token? So let's go to the other tab in Postman. So guys, if you see, we are in Postman, we are under authorization, and type I have selected OAuth 2.0. so here let's go down. So we are under configuration options. So again guys, now we are generating the token. Okay, so token name we can give any name. Grant type we have to select client credentials. Now this access token URL, and if you see this 23E8, so basically this is my tenant ID. So in your case as well, this access token URL will be same. The only change will be this tenant ID. Okay, so again I will share this access token URL in the description of this video. Okay, then we need to provide the client ID. So it is the client ID of our app which is consuming API, that is it is external app. Okay, and it is our XYZ app. So let's go to overview. Let's copy this client ID, and then guys, this client secret, you remember we added client secret and we said it is visible only once, and we copied it in the notepad. So let's copy this client secret, and then let's go to this advanced options, and can you see this resource? So basically here we need to provide the app ID URI for our Azure APIM app. So again let's copy this app ID URI and let's paste it over here, and now let's say get new access token. Yes, authentication is complete, and we have received the token. Let's copy it. Let's close this, and now here let's try to call this API by providing this token. So I will go to this authorization. Under type I will say bearer token, and here let's provide this token, and now I will say send. And can you see it? Now it says 200 OK, and our API call has been successful. That's it guys. Thanks for listening.